What's up, everybody? Pat here. And, while I'm a writer, producer, mixer, we're not in the studio today. I'm actually on the road. So, this is a piece of content that I was wanting to make and talk about with you all. The evolution of a music producer, from where it started to where it is now. We're not going to be opening up any DAWs. We're not doing a song surgery. We're not going to do any technical stuff. Today is more of a little more history, a little more philosophy, where this whole thing started, where it is now, where it might be going. So, mini essay, mini lecture. We'll see how it goes. If you guys like this kind of thing, we can do more of it. If you do not, we can skip it. But I just want to try it out, see how it goes. So let's get right into it. We're going into Keynote because I do not have the tremendous video editing budget and skill set to do like a proper documentary. So I figured more of a lecture kind of thing would be cool. The evolution of the music producer from then to 2025, which is where we are now, at least for a little while. All right. So the 1960s and 70s is kind of where we think of some of the first early greats. This is the era of which a music producer is, what I call the console boss, the captain of the ship. A producer at this point is mostly responsible for budget, handling facilities, hiring engineers, hiring players. These are your George Martin, Quincy Jones, Smokey Robinson. There's other great examples as well, but those are the guys that I wanted to just kind of name in that column. On the creative side of things, some of these guys are a little more heavy-handed. Some of them are less heavy-handed. They might be doing things like, what we would call comping now. Then maybe going through takes and deciding which takes are going to get used, which arrangements are going to get used. But they weren't necessarily guys that were like playing on records or, making beats like we do in the modern era. But then that transfers into kind of the next evolution of the role, which is the auteur era. Likening this to kind of like in film, you have certain directors who have a very noticeable style, like your Tarantinos, so many others as well. But this is where a music producer is now starting to have a real sonic identity, a real sonic imprint on what records are sounding like. Studio facilities in that early era, that 60s and 70s era, Abbey Road, Motown records, like facilities might not have been as prevalent and accessible everywhere. Now we've gone into, music consumption has evolved into some different mediums. We're starting to get into cassettes, CDs, things like that. A little bit more consumable. There's more facilities to support this, larger growing industry. So key players in this one would be your Mutt Langes, Rick Rubin, Dr. Dre, Timbaland. At this point, these guys are now a little bit more involved in the record making process. They're not just hiring out players. They're not just hiring out facilities. Dre has signature sounding drums that, we can all listen to those records now and go, oh shit, those are Dre drums. And now we're emulating some of what those guys are doing. Mutt Lange guitars, where he's making guys do individual notes and punching them in and tuning every string on a chord to be perfectly in tune and just playing the chord. These are things that we're starting to see. Rick Rubin, with Beastie Boys and things like that, is starting to become more of a household name. All of these dudes now are almost producers as artists, and we have our popular artists, but now we also have our popular producers. Whereas before, those guys might have been a little bit more behind the scenes, not really talked about as like a household name. We're starting to transition. And after this era, we now go into kind of where we are now, the 2010s to this point in time, where producers are still household names. And many of them, some artists that work with a producer might blow up because they worked with a producer. This is the producer is the bridge era. We're no longer selling CDs. We're no longer selling cassettes. We're in the streaming era. Producers at this point might be co-writers. They might have written the entire song. They probably handled the arranging. They might have played on the record. They might even have done a bunch of the editing on the record. They might even be a mixer on the record at this point. We're now fully into laptop era, i.e. what I'm doing right now. We're using less gear than we ever used. We're using more internal processing. We're using DSP things like UAD. We are working remotely, collaborating from afar. We don't even need the artist to come into our studio sometimes to finish making a record. We are no longer at the point where a record might take months to make. We are at the point where an end of day demo might end up being a record, or at least a large part of what a final record is. Um, which leads us to continue to talk about that, how the economics of music and technology changed sort of everything. As we all know, well, some of you may not know. I don't know how old many of you are, but Napster in 1999 is sort of the first big domino to fall in this chain reaction that has completely altered the economics of everything, where people are giving away music for free, peer-to-peer file sharing. iTunes in 2003 with iPods. This is where things are becoming more portable. And I think, at that time, iTunes was still charging for music, but you could still just go to Napster or, any BitTorrent site and download albums and throw them on your iPod and be good to go and listen to music for free. Same thing, now 2010, every record ever made is on the internet. Enough said. Um, we are past the point now of where a recording budget used to be $200,000 to $500,000 to being, for an indie artist, it's for whatever they can afford at their job. And even for young artists getting label deals, they might be getting an entire advance, and a portion of that is dedicated to recording. But even $200,000 of today's money compared to what the budgets were in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars is chump change when you adjust for inflation. Uh, we have DAWs. We can make a record with a Focusrite Scarlett, an SM7, and a laptop. We no longer need the facilities. We don't need the Neve preamps. We don't need, even though I still use that stuff, we don't need all of that incredible analog front end. We don't need a giant SSL or a giant Neve to make a record anymore. Uh, and we're in the era of volume. 120,000 songs are being uploaded to Spotify every day. So speed is everything. And what used to be, the overhead of making a record is no longer in the money that it would take for a facility. It's now in the time that it will take an artist and a producer and their team to make a record. Which is why we have seen an increasing, like the skill set of a producer used to be, you're the money guy, and now it is well beyond that. It is now you are a writer, you are an engineer, you are an arranger, you are a producer, you are a mixer, you are the therapist for your artist, you are your artist's friend. You have to simultaneously balance all of those things while somehow maintaining some sort of philosophical north and south and direction of what this record is about, or what this single is about, what this artist's direction is. You and the artist are now the A&R team. You are the developers of the artist together, the team of two. And on top of that, you still have to handle things like budget and, managing schedules. Some producers even are invested to the point where they're helping their artists with content and, the visual side or the social media side of things, which I'm not going to talk too much about because, as you can see, I'm obviously terrible at it. So what do I really know? Um, I thought it was cool to kind of go through some famous producers as case studies and think about what they bring to the table in reference to this expanding skill set, what we can take from them, how we piece it all together, et cetera, et cetera. So for the first one, we'll do Rick Rubin. Um, Rick Rubin is sort of like, of the many archetypes of music producer, he's the philosopher guy. He's the wizard, the yogi, the guru. And I think probably, well, Beastie Boys were sick, and he's made a lot of really cool records. But probably my favorite story would be Rick Rubin and Johnny Cash. After Johnny Cash had his rise and fall, he's kind of not faded away. Johnny Cash was still Johnny Cash, but he certainly wasn't as relevant commercially in towards the end of his life and in the 1990s as he was in his heyday. And then this is where a guy like Rick Rubin comes in. He is the perfect illustration of production as philosophy. Uh, he basically took Johnny Cash and all of his his negative emotion, I hurt myself today, and just stripped it down to the bare truth, which is the opposite of some of the case studies that we'll go into going forward here. But this was not a story of gear. It wasn't a story of facilities. It wasn't a story of big arrangements, like a big string Motown arrangement. It wasn't any of that. It was about as bare bones as you could get. Just pure raw, the old sound of Johnny Cash's voice and the pain. And it worked. And there's plenty of examples of this outside of Rick Rubin and Johnny Cash, but as a focal point of a famous producer, I thought it was a good one worth mentioning. Going into the next one here, sort of the opposite of Rick Rubin would be Max Martin. And, if I'm not mistaken, now Max Martin has entire teams of people that he's managing. But very much, I don't associate Max Martin, and I don't think many who studied his work would associate him with philosophy. Um, if there is a philosophy, it is go big or go home. Um, he has a very scientific systematized approach to making music. Um, there are their crew, their philosophy, their workflow is, they're writing melodies to the bar and to the vowel shape, and the melody is king. Words almost don't even matter, which was born of the fact that these dudes are all Swedish and English was not their first language. So when they were writing those Britney Spears, those Katy Perry songs, lyric is secondary to melody, and production is even probably a higher up than even lyric, which is interesting. We're not necessarily spilling great human truths and sharing deep scars here. We're literally engineering dopamine hits over the course of a 3-minute pop song. Um, this is songwriting and production as science, and numbers and formulas, not as sort of the human experience. Which, ironically, these records sold in the, it's Max fucking Martin. It's Britney Spears, it's Katy Perry. These are records that will live into music history and pop music history and will be relevant forever. All the while, not necessarily being the deepest cut artist takes. So this is where I think we kind of birth the modern um, songwriter producer guy. This is your part scientist, your part hit maker, your part engineer. This is where it gets a little more complicated. You're no longer just thinking about feeling becomes music, becomes record. You're thinking about all of the in-betweens of those things and how to create a pathway, a system, to get from we start with the song, we end with a pop banger. And now bringing us into the modern age, I think, there are, again, so many great examples, but Billie Eilish and Finneas, I think, are kind of your modern classic sort of bedroom pop sort of thing. The pendulum is swinging again. Um, you now have, you know, intimacy competing with that sort of, smashed -6, -7 LUFS pop brick wall. Not that their records aren't loud. I mean, Bad Guy, I think, is still, pre-normalization for Spotify, like -8. So still loud, but more important, you have a brother-sister duo writing and making these records in their bedroom. I know that tends to, people go, wait, but they also hired mixers, and I understand that. I'm going to address that. Um, but it's a different style of production and songwriting than we had seen up to this point. Breaths and reverb tails and intimate moments are sort of what are making these productions. And while I'm sure that, Billy and Finneas have their systems, their preferred keys, their preferred workflows, it's not quite as like scientifically dialed in and engineered as that Max Martin Pop Factory sort of thing. Um, and this is, I think, the real turning point of bedroom pop and indie pop kind of swinging back into the mainstream. And again, just to address it again, I understand that um, even if they wrote these records at their house, that they are, of course, outsourcing the editing, mixing, and mastering of these to, big studios and big producers and mixers that are, helping them finish these songs, who might be using piles of gear and high budget, et cetera, et cetera. But it is a representation of the democratized record making that I do and that many of maybe you watching do and our peers do. So it's important, I think, to mention it. And again, I also understand with Billie Eilish, it's kind of a controversial topic because while people will paint her and Finneas as this sort of bedroom success story, we do know, if you do enough digging on their family background, that, to say it to a degree, they're Nepo babies. So, like, we're not going to necessarily, in this particular study of, this producer and artist dynamic, laud them as being a true, like, zero to hero. the more important takeaway is their production style in the modern era and how it translates into the modern music economy. Um, so after looking at those three very different takes on music making, and three different production styles, what do we take away? The producer's main role always is to be the bridge between the artist's vision and the tangible product. We all have, as producers, a unique set of skills that we bring to the record making process, and maximizing those skills and knowing where to bring in other collaborators to fill in gaps is sort of the key to being a great producer. Um, some guys are incredible engineers and they're going to get great sounds. They're really good with sound design, creating samples. Some people are going to be like your Rick Rubin, your almost your therapist, guru, philosopher friend who's going to is going to create an emotional intimacy with an artist that is going to allow the producer to get incredible performances and material out of an artist. Um, or you might be a virtuoso player. You might just be an incredible person who has a unique sound, like a Skrillex, or Dre with his like incredibly unique at the time cutting edge tape drums that are a sonic imprint that is going to benefit any artist. For me, the producer is the translator, just kind of continue to expound on that. Um, and in the modern era, our job is to, using those aforementioned skills and archetypes, immediately be able to capture the emotion or a vibe of an artist and take that and turn it into a record quickly and cheaply, because budgets are virtually non-existent in the indie record sphere. And I think, a mental note that I had when I was making this is, wow, one thing that we need to talk about is how do we all make money um, as modern artists and modern producers working independently without publishers, without record labels, et cetera, et cetera. But going back to producer as translator and the modern workflow, one thing I thought that was valuable to say was, when I'm making a song with one of my artists, I might have them in my studio twice throughout the process of making that song. One for maybe a writing session, or maybe one if they're bringing me the demo and I'm doing a little bit of building with them. And then another time when they come to record final vocals. And, comparing that to decades ago where a band might go or an artist might go into a studio for several months to finish an album. Um, you know, Here today we're doing, 2, 3 to 4 hour sessions to finish a song. Um, and, we're doing like one arrangement where we're just go, go, go. And I'm comping a final vocal out of 5 to 10 takes, whereas in the past there might have been 5 or 10 takes per 5 arrangements of the potential final version of the song, which is crazy. While we're talking about production, I thought it was important to bring up AI. I think it would be foolish to not discuss it. It's scary. Look what it's done to graphic design. Look what it's done to video. I don't think that we're safe in music. I think as the big record labels and their partners in tech continue to maximize shareholder profit, we will inevitably get some shit downstream our way. For now, I think we're better off than our friends in photography and film and those other visual creators. But it's important to be cognizant of it, where it could potentially go, what it could potentially do, and while it's here, learn how to harness it to the best of our abilities. You can stick your head in the sand and pretend that it's never going to be a problem, and I'm not sure that that's the case. Couple of tools that I thought were worth mentioning are Chordify, Suno, CoProducer, which is an AI algorithm plugin by Output, and Splice, which integrates with Pro Tools now. And those last two in particular are pretty cool at having an AI component that works with your work to suggest new samples. Chordify is something that I use pretty regularly because I don't have to chart out an entire song anymore. I can upload a MP3 or a wave, whatever, to Chordify, and it will chart the whole song out for me. So that cuts some of the work out for me. Suno, I've messed with Suno Studio. It's interesting. It's still not perfect to me. I actually canceled it because I'm not going to end up using it. But for some people, I'm sure it could be pretty useful. You still have to have a pretty good technical acumen to work it into a producer's workflow. But it is interesting. You can basically import stems or a whole MP3 into Suno Studio and give prompts on, hey, I want an acoustic guitar that's flat picked, played like this, and it'll generate you some ideas, and it's interesting. I'm sure that it's going to get to the point where it's incredibly usable. For now, I'm not sure if it's there. Co-producer and Splice are both very similar. Co-producers be from the plugin company, also studio furniture company, Output. Essentially, it's a plugin that goes on your master bus. You play a few bars of music. It'll make suggestions of samples that would potentially match with your vibe, and you'll give it some prompts. Limitations of this are it's just not as robust in terms of its library as Splice is. The whole thing works off of Arcade. It works off of Arcade's sample library, which is cool, and I like Arcade as well. It's like another version of Splice in a way, but it works in tandem with that. It's good. I think it's primarily going to be most useful in EDM and pop. I don't think it's really great for anything with rock or stringed instruments. And then there's Splice, which we all know what Splice is, but Splice now is integrated with Pro Tools. So for my Pro Tools people, I mean, that's a total, I use it all the time, every day, because it's just right in the DAW where you can feed it a series of bars and it'll make suggestions and you can filter. So AI is not going anywhere. You can fight it all you want and you can die on that hill. I respect you for it, but if you're trying to keep your head above water, there are ways to harness AI. There's more than I've even mentioned here just enhance your workflow. So is what it is. We'll see where it goes. It's something that I try to follow pretty closely. I would suggest you do the same. And let's wrap it up. Final reflections here. The cool thing when I was making this, it's taking a couple of hours and brainstorming, is it's fun to think that like we're still all fundamentally human and chasing the exact same thing that people have been chasing since they've started making music. So the tools have changed and they're rapidly changing all the time. The budgets sadly have changed for the worse. There's still some money to be made, but again, like most things in our late stage capitalism, kind of globalized economy, a lot of that money making potential is kind of locked into a relatively small segment of the population of music makers. So breaking into that is difficult. Surviving to that point is difficult. But the ability to create is, it's never been easier. And I think it is comforting to know that the human need to express through the form of music has not gone away. It's never going to go away. The desire for people to consume it has not gone away, will not go away. It might change. Um, we'll see how, what the internet did to everybody in our generation. We'll see what AI does to consumption patterns of music and young people. But for now, the music producer's not going anywhere. So hope you enjoyed this. And if this is a style of video or something that you would like to, something that you'd like to see more of, please let me know. I do enjoy doing a little bit more talking head style things instead of just this plugin makes this sound good. There's so much of that. And if there is real interest in more content like this at a deeper level, I'd be happy to maybe invest a little more time and learning how to do better editing, get some B-roll in here, make a proper documentary. But that's it for me. Signing off till next week, guys. All YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe if you made it this far. We'll see you on the next one. Love yourself, love your friends, keep making good music.